Gets me every time. Hey Java developers, JDK 25 will be releasing soon, and what a release it will be. JDK 25 will be a release with long-term support offerings, which means many of you will be migrating to JDK 25 at some point in the future, just hopefully in the not too distant future. Once again, I will be going through the release notes of the JDK release, an easy way to find out what to look forward to, what to make a note of, and what changes you might need to make when upgrading to JDK 25. I have also covered this for JDK 22, 23, and 24 as well if you want to learn all that has changed. Also on that note, be sure to check out our Road to Java 25 videos where we will cover the key changes between 21 and 25 in more detail. Several new features were added with the JDK 25 release, both at the JDK Enhancement Proposal level and a few more minor additions. JEP 506 adds scoped values. The second major feature from Project Loom, scope values are an immutable value that is available within a specific scope of an application. They can be useful for providing contextual information similar to thread local, though aren't a direct replacement for them. Module imports allow the importing of all the exported API of a module in a single line with import module name, like this example here. If you're importing multiple modules that contain the same class name, you can resolve the conflict by explicitly importing the class you are intending to use, like in this example. The key feature of the paving the on-ramp, compact source files and instance main methods is finalized in JDK 25. This simplifies the requirements when writing a simple class, helpful for educational purposes, and when writing scripts in Java. Flexible constructor bodies is finalized in JDK 25 with JEP 513. Flexible constructor bodies allow for adding statements before the call to super in a constructor. A new system property, standard in encoding, has been added. This property allows for the setting of charset to be used when reading in character data, for example when using input stream reader and scanner. The method getChars has been added to char sequence and char buffer to allow for the bulk reading of characters. Commonly used classes like string, string builder, and char buffer all implement char sequence and should allow for more efficient operation when looping over a sequence of characters. A new method, connection label, has been added to the java.net.http response. This method returns an opaque connection label, which is useful for determining whether two requests were carried on the same connection or different connections. Two new methods, HTTP response.bodyhandlers.limiting and bodysubscribers.limiting, have been added to the HTTP client API. These methods can be used to limit the number of response body bytes that the application is willing to accept. If the limit is exceeded, an IO exception will be thrown. The zip file system provider has been updated to allow for setting of a read-only or a rewrite mode. This is controlled through the access mode property. The classes JavaUtilZip Inflator and JavaUtilZip Deflator now implement autoclosable. This will automatically call the close method when these classes are used in a try with resources block. As far as what would likely concern developers, there's only one noteworthy deprecation in JDK 25. The Java locale use old ISO codes system property has been deprecated. Introduced in JDK 17, it allowed users to revert to the legacy ISO 639 language codes for Hebrew, Indonesian, and Yiddish. This is only a transitory property. Setting true on it will no longer have an effect and will issue a warning. There were several preview features added or updated in JDK 25. Stable Values provides an API for immutable values that can be treated as constants by the JVM, but offer greater flexibility as to when the value is set than is currently provided by the final keyword, which requires the value to be set at either class or instance initialization. The Structure Concurrency API enters its fifth preview with JDK 25. This round of preview introduces significant changes to the Structure Concurrency API. Be sure to check it out and send us feedback on it. JEP 507 re-previews the primitive types and pattern matching feature, which remains unchanged from its initial previewing in JDK 23. The Vector API remains in incubator status and will remain so until Valhalla features are integrated into the mainline JDK. This section covers a variety of changes. Most would be a minor behavior change, addition, or removal. File operations with a trailing space in the directory or file name will now consistently fail on Windows, throwing an I/O exception. Previously, some of these operations with such an illegal character would appear to succeed when they in fact silently failed. Java.io.file.delete no longer deletes read-only files on Windows. Prior to JDK 25, file.delete deleted read-only files by removing this DOS attribute before attempting to delete. As removing the attribute and deleting the file do not comprise a single atomic operation, this could result in the file still existing but with modified attributes if deletion were to fail. If your application does depend on behavior, you can set the jdk.io.file allow delete read-only files property to true to restore this behavior. The default console attained by the system.console is no longer based on JLine. This is reverting JDK behavior to what it was with JDK 21. The Java I/O file class is changed so that an instance of file created from the empty abstract path name now behaves consistently like a file created from the current user directory. Previous behavior was for many methods to fail in this condition. This means that the methods can read, exist, and is directory will now return true instead of false. The get free space last modified and length will return the expected values of 0, and set readable and set last modified will attempt to change the file's attributes instead of failing. This change means that the behavior of java.io.file matches that of the java.nio.file API. The JWeb server tool -d command line option now accepts directories specified with a relative path. The java.net.http client now rejects HTTP2 responses that contain header files prohibited by the HTTP2 specification. This should be a transparent change to users of the HTTP client API, but could result in new failures when connecting to a non-HTTP2 compliant server. This method, java.net.url open connection, will no longer fall back to using FTP by default when called on a non-local file if the server name is not localhost, but instead throws a malformed URL exception. If your application depends upon legacy behavior, it can be re-enabled by setting the property jdk.net.file.ftp fallback to true. An API note has been added to the get certificates and get codesigner methods of the java.util.jar entry and java.net.jar URL connection, recommending that the caller should perform further validation steps on the code signers that sign the jar file. Check the JBS ticket for more info. CLDR version 47 is now supported. Check the Unicode release notes on CLDR 47 for what has changed. A few notable changes are shown here. Restrictions on extension functions has been removed in the XPath API, specifically those imposed by Feature Secure Processing FSP and the JDK.xml enable extension functions property. Check the JBS ticket for more details on this issue. XML stream reader's error handling where its next method incorrectly threw end of file exception instead of the documented XML stream exception when encountering a premature end of file has been fixed. For you operation folks out there are a number of updates coming in JDK 25 to make note of. Also, be sure to check out my Road to Java 25 videos on performance and runtime updates and ahead of time computation, as I go into more depth on some of the key runtime changes made between Java 21 and 25. JEPs 514 and 515 are part of Project Leiden, which has the goals of reducing startup time and warm-up time. JEP 514 allows an AOT cache to be created in a single step, a reduction from a two-step process in JDK 24. And 515 allows method profiling to be added to an AOT cache, improving application warm-up. JFR got two major updates in JDK 25 with JEPs 518 and 520. JEP 518 improves JFR's ability by redesigning its thread stack sampling mechanism. JEP 520 improves JFR's ability to time and trace method execution. This works via JFR's events and configuring the methods to be timed or traced, like in this example. The compact object headers feature, added as an experimental feature in JDK 24, has been promoted to a final feature in JDK 25. It reduces the minimum size an object header can be, which reduces heap sizes by 10 to 20% in typical cases. Your mileage might vary. Compact object headers can be enabled with plus use compact object headers. Additionally, if you are using compressed object headers with a custom image created with JLink, an additional step is needed to create the CDS archives for this configuration. After creating the image, you need to run this command. Generational Shenandoah has been made a final feature in JDK 25 as well. If available on your JDK, it can be enabled with the JVM args plus use Shenandoah GC and Shenandoah GC mode equals generational. JEPs 509 introduces the JFR CPU time profiling as an experimental feature, which, as the name suggests, can calculate CPU usage within specific methods in an application. It's only available when running on Linux and is controlled through the JDK CPU time sample events. All source code and build support for the 32-bit x86 ports were removed with the JDK 25 release. Subsequently, 32-bit OpenJDK binaries are no longer be available starting with the JDK 25 release. Thread dumps generated by the Hotspot Diagnostic MXBean and JCMD thread.dump2 file will now include lock information. The jar validate command has been updated to generate warning messages for the conditions on screen. The listed JMX properties have been removed. These were all considered transitional properties. The periodic sampling functionality has been removed, including the stat sampler and the flag perf data sampling interval. Old object monitor performance encounters exposed in the run rt_sync star has been removed. Many of these counters can be tracked through JFR events. Check the JBS ticket for details. The JMX classes JavaX management.modelMbean descriptor support and XML parse exception have been marked as deprecated for removal. The JVM argument use compressed class pointers has been marked for removal. The JVM will default to enabling compressed class pointers. For more details on this change, check the JBS ticket. The G1 garbage collector is reducing pause time spikes by improving region selection. This is done by collecting better information during the marking phase about which regions might significantly increase pause times and avoid them. The serial and parallel garbage collectors now ensure that no Java threads are in a JNI critical region before initiating a garbage collection, eliminating unnecessary out-of-memory errors. As a result of this fix, the flag GC locker retry allocation count is no longer necessary and has been removed. For additional information on this change, be sure to check the JBS ticket. On Debian-based Linux distributions, the etc time zone file was used to determine the JDK's default time zone. This has been updated to use the etc local time as a primary source. The JFR events JDK socket read, socket write, file read, and file write had a default duration of 20 milliseconds. The threshold has been lowered to 1 millisecond, but a rate limiting of 100 events per second is imposed on these events. You can update the JFR configuration to restore the previous behavior if needed. Under some conditions, Java-C could have modified jar or zip files placed on class path. By writing class files to them, this has been corrected in JDK 25. Read the JBS ticket for more details on when this issue occurred. In the Java source code, character literals can only contain a single UTF-16 character. Java-C was incorrectly allowing 2 UTF-16 literals. This has been corrected, and the Java-C will now throw a compile error when this happens. The excellent none compiler flag no longer implies no warn. This was incorrect behavior for when the example command excellent none serial was used. It would simply suppress all warnings including for serial. This has been corrected in JDK 25. The output for xprint in Java-C has been updated to include bounds for type variables. This example will now print when xprint is used. In JDK 25, Java-C will now insert a null check on immediately enclosing instance. This is to conform with the Java language specification 15.9.4. As a result, there is no way to instantiate an inner class with null as an immediately enclosing instance. If your code does depend on the O behavior, you can set the argument null check outer this to false. JavaDoc saw several updates in JDK 25. First, it provides a new syntax highlighting option to enable syntax highlighting in snippet tags and pre-code HTML elements using the highlight.js library. Second, JavaDoc now treats classes and interfaces with packages that are not exported or exported by qualified export as hidden unless they are explicitly included in the documentation. And lastly, JavaDoc now strips comment indentation from the beginning of lines in traditional documentation comments as it already does in Markdown documentation comments to prevent any unnecessary whitespace from being added. Starting with JDK 25, JPackage no longer includes service bindings for a runtime image that it creates. Prior to JDK 25, JPackage would include service bindings for runtime images. As a result, the generated runtime images produced by JPackage might not include the same set of modules as it did in prior versions. Previous behavior can be achieved by adding the bind services JLink option. And lastly, but not leastly, we come to the security changes in JDK 25. JEP 5.10 introduces the key derivation function API as a final feature after previewing in JDK 24. The KDF API allows for the creation of additional keys from a secret key and other data. JEP 470 is a preview API for encoding and decoding objects in the widely used privacy-enhanced mail format. A new mechanism has been added to support specific signature streams based on their TLS scope. This is done via the JDK.TLS disabled algorithms property in the java.security properties file. The debug output from the java.security.debug system property now includes thread ID, call information, and timestamp information by default. It will follow a format like the example here. Support for the TLS Key Material Exporters KME allows for additional key material from a connection negotiated TLS keys. Check the JBS ticket for more details. This list of permission classes and methods has been marked for deprecated for removal. They were only used by the security manager, which has been permanently disabled and will be removed in a future release. Usage of the JDK include in exception security and system property have been expanded to include more networking exception messages and more categories that can be configured as enabled or disabled. Check the JBS ticket for more information on this change. The performance of the MLDSA and MLKEM operations have been improved significantly on the ARM ARCH64 and AVX 512 platforms. A new system property, com.sun.ocsp read timeout has been added. By default, it will match the value of the com.sun.security.ocsp timeout, whose default value will be changed to 15 seconds with JDK 25. The password-based secret key factory implementation from the Sun JCE provider used to reject non-ASCII passwords. They have been enhanced to use UTF-16 and thus allow Unicode characters to be used as passwords. So good news for anyone who wants to include emojis in their passwords. There have been a number of updates to the encryption algorithms affecting various APIs, including the Message Digest, Sun PKSE LS11, and the XML signature implementation, which you can see summaries of here. If these changes could impact applications you manage, definitely check those JBS tickets for more info. On the flip side, there have been a number of algorithms that will be disabled by default or certificates that have been removed or are no longer trusted. Once again, check the JBS ticket if you think your applications might be impacted. One final note, here is a list of JBS issues I didn't cover in this video. Many of these changes either affect only a very small number of users or are minor performance improvements. Alright, that's it for the changes coming in the JDK 25 release. Once again, be sure to check out our Road to Java 25 playlist, which covers the migration from Java 21 to 25 and offers more in-depth explanations on new language and runtime features, updates to APIs, security changes, and more. Finally, be sure to watch our Java 25 launch livestream on September 16th, starting at 1500 UTC. Myself, Anna, and Nikolai will be hosting live from Silicon Valley. Check our YouTube channel for more details. Until next time, happy coding!